All right, welcome to the podcast. We have friend of the podcast, attorney Myles Breiner. How's it going? Good morning.
Another Saturday in paradise.
Very good. So, I heard you just got off the phone with CNN. Please tell what's the deal?
Well, because of what happened on January 6th in the riot at Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., one member of our community is under charges and facing possible prosecution for his participation in the occupation of the Capitol.
Wow, that was shocking. So it was quite incredible to see the Trump rally, which then encouraged a insurrection at the Capitol. What were your thoughts criminally for the people who were like caught taking selfies, or the guy with the really cool Viking hat? I think it was like.
Well, it depends on the circumstances. Having lived and worked on Capitol Hill many, many years ago, the area outside the rotunda, outside the physical structure of the building, is subject to close security, but it is a public space, and so those arrested on the Capitol grounds face different charges than those arrested inside who may have committed various felonies or misdemeanors, ranging from simple trespass to destruction of property, possible attempts to kidnap. Raises all kinds of issues. It isn't one single group of people that were there. There are a number of people. Just looking at the various flags that were being displayed outside the Capitol, as well as inside the Capitol, you had a number of groups. You had POWs and veterans missing in action, that group, Vietnam vets. You had members of various organizations, everything from even possibly people from Antifa. We don't know. There's a number of people entered, and a number of people were enjoying the opportunity to rampage through the Capitol.
So we're going to wrap up this national headline with solutions. Do you think there's a way, or do you have any ideas of how we could make sure that people that do create groups like this, who are then seen as alt-right or fringe or dangerous, how do we give them a voice without them assembling and then putting people in danger?
Well, then that's the thing. It's a fine line. I hate to quote, was it the former Secretary Rumsfeld when he described the disaster in the invasion of Iraq, when he said that democracy is a messy business.
Yeah.
But the reality is that short of a totalitarian dictatorship or authoritarian government, the nature of democracy is this, where we're allowed to assemble. That's why we have a right of free assemblage. That's why we have the right to free speech, and it's enshrined in our Constitution, and we live with this every day. And in fact, tolerating people like the Proud Boys and other people who voice offensive, racist language, anything short of calling out or calling for violence, has to be tolerated. That makes us a stronger democracy. I think back to the 1920s when we had the Ku Klux Klan marching up Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House to the Capitol, over 100,000 people in white robes. We had to tolerate it. We had to accept that this was their expression of their opinion. No, they didn't breach the walls and the sanctity of the Capitol, but they burned effigies, they burned crosses. This is in Washington, D.C. in the 20s, and your viewers go to YouTube and easily find these videos. We had neo-Nazis marching up to the time we entered into the war, and prior to December 1941, we had the second largest Nazi party outside of Germany was in the United States. So yes, these are offensive things, but ideally, I'd rather see this expressed openly in a public forum so that it can be critiqued and demolished. It can be critiqued and shown to be foolish and unsupported by the facts if that's the case. It's when we suppress this evidence that it plays into the hands of people who believe in some of these outrageous notions of a secret government or a state within a state. So I submit that transparency is, as they say, that sunshine sanitizes, right? So I believe in sunshine laws. I believe in transparency in the government. And I think going forward, we have to really embrace that and not fall victim to wanting to suppress these people and suppress their views. I'd rather, like Joe McCarthy, when he finally was in front of the early black and white television cameras, and he was cross-examined by an attorney in the Senate chambers, and he was exposed for being a liar and being a terrible person. Consequently, we got rid of McCarthy and McCarthyism by the public exposure, not by suppressing it and trying to stop these people from expressing their views, but by giving them an opportunity to express their idiocy so that it can be exposed.
That's quite profound, because I think it has the opposite effect when you try to put a muzzle on people. They'll just find another avenue. They'll still assemble. And then you're stuck with that underground.
It feeds into their justification, saying, you see, their response is going to be, it's the government, and they're shutting us down, and they're taking away our right to express ourselves. Now, on the other hand, you have Twitter permanently deleting Donald Trump's account, shutting him out. I'm happy they did it. The problem is it's far too late in the game. They should have done it before, because what he was doing up until now, this wasn't simply, he's a citizen, he's the president of the United States, and he was publishing lies after lie after lie that people believed. And that's the nature of leaders. Leaders set a standard. When Jack Kennedy stopped wearing a hat, the haberdashery industry was destroyed. Now that sounds kind of comical when you think about that. Up into his election in 1961, men wore hats. It was considered inappropriate to not have a hat in public. Yet he chose to present this new image. And that image was adopted by everyone. The Princeton haircut was named after, essentially John Kennedy.
Oh, nice history lesson there. I didn't know that. But yeah, I mean, people got to be able to express themselves. And if it goes underground, that is not good. Last point on this. I think the root of this was the lie, or the big lie, as some people are calling it, that there was election fraud. There probably is some instances of people voting twice, or maybe there is an instance of like some sort of minor fraud, but there wasn't enough to overcome 12. You can't find 11 or 12,000 votes in Georgia.
Well, the call itself to say, I need 11,760 votes, literally telling them to create it. Every election, you have people doing foolish things, sending in, voting for, their dead mother or their dead cousin or something. In the few instances in Georgia, and I believe also in, I think it was also Texas, there were people who had left the state, voted absentee, but were so concerned because of what Trump was saying that you can't trust, the mail-in ballots. They went back to their home states and voted. And ironically, those are Republican votes. Because the irony
the double
of all
voting,
this is, the irony is that the votes in this case, no matter the majority of the people that were voting by mail, turned out to be Democrats.
Yeah,
okay? That's how it goes. But Trump created his own problem. I mean, he basically handed us, and thank God Stacey Abrams got organized in Georgia, but the ranting and ravings of Trump's paranoid schizophrenia resulted, in pushing people to go out and vote, because it was clear this guy is crazy. He's attacking his own party. So going forward, I think the Republicans have a real difficult time. I mean, they're so splintered. The divisiveness of Trump has seeped through every institution in our society. That's why Biden is ideal for the role that he's playing. It's a bit ironic that Merrick Garland is going to be hopefully the next U.S. attorney. He should have been next U.S. Supreme Court justice. But that being said, I think going forward, we have an opportunity with all three branches of government being with the Democrats, and hopefully the public will support the initiatives to get the pandemic under control and get money into rebuilding infrastructure, like during the Depression, when the New Deal and Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the Congress got together and got people employed, and a majority of that was public work projects. And and we
Yeah,
desperately need that.
yeah,
And you and I both know that because we drive to work every day, and the roads in this town are terrible.
yeah, and President-elect Biden is smart enough to know. Everybody kind of agrees, and it seems like presidents always kind of push that in the beginning. Infrastructure, we could all agree that our airports, our roads, our bridges need to be fixed. It's something that, you know, people on both sides of the aisle can go ahead and agree on. So we're going to go to local politics now, and you and I had a client that I think is just a great story. They had a bench warrant, but because of the messed up way people are charged in Hawaii, you could literally be involved in an incident or just named in a report. You could be in the military and be restationed, or you could just move on with your life, go to school on the mainland or whatever. And then a bench warrant can come up from an event that took place months ago. And we had a client who needed to come back to Hawaii. And you and I, we set him up to get picked up at the airport. Can you go ahead and take over?
Which client was that?
We've done it a few times, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, because a couple of times. Well, he turned himself in, and was and frankly, your assistance was invaluable.
Yeah, and
that's why I urge my clients to use your services, because you set it up perfectly, and he was able to avoid the ignominy of being stuck in jail indefinitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were waiting at the ramp when he came off the airplane, and much to their surprise, they didn't have to tackle him and cuff him. He was put in restraints eventually, but you fortunately, within a short period of time, you were able to get him released. So kudos to you. You did a great job. That's why I insist my clients, if they do have to obtain bail, that they use you and your firm for the simple reason that you got your act together.
Thank you for the kind words. And there is a problem, and that's what the the private sector kind of specializes in. You have to solve a problem, or guess what? You're not going to have a client. You're not going to have like a good or a service to exchange. So you have to be able to figure out how to solve problems. So the problem was this poor client who didn't know they had a bench warrant. Luckily, they stayed in touch with you. You were able to disclose to them that they did have a bench warrant and they needed to return to Hawaii. But guess what? With the backwards way that we're handling COVID, it's just about impossible to fly in and then what? Hang out for 14 days, self-quarantine, and then go turn in, and then hope that everything works out, and then flying back. So we had to set this guy up, and he went in knowing exactly what the deal was, just to avoid the 2 weeks he would have had to sit here just before he was cleared to actually go turn in and bail out.
Precisely. It's funny, Nick. Attorneys, we're the flavor of the day when everything's going great, and then we're condemned when something goes wrong. I've never had a client say other than awesome things about you. So I wish I had that kind of win record that you have, because we deal with the aftermath. But the fact is that the greatest anxiety that most people have when they're charged with an offense is the notion of having to get picked up, get processed at HPD, or get processed and released out of OCCC or wherever it's at. But it's that initial anxiety that's so overwhelming, and they're confused. They don't know what to do. And for me, it's been a luxury to be able to work with you, in particular, your firm. I don't have to worry about it. I contact you and you organize it. So it makes me look good. So thank you.
Right on. So just in general, I'm going to get on my soapbox now again. But it's quite a shame that I had a client who totally flew back and was one of the other clients, different client than the one that you represented, but did the exact same deal where she had to fly in. We had to set things up so that she could just turn in and get arrested, sort of scheduled at the airport, just so that she could avoid the quarantine. And the game plan was, and what we've done together is, you appear in court in front of Judge Kawamura, you make the argument and ask for permission to leave the jurisdiction, and then the person doesn't have to camp out here, especially when they don't have the funds. They don't have to camp out and try to live in Hawaii, one of the most expensive places ever, for like 2 weeks or a few months to get permission to leave the jurisdiction from the jury trial judge. So can you speak to some of the differences there are when you're able to go in with a private attorney and get that accommodation versus, I feel as though sometimes the people who have to go with the public defender, they get treated poorly and they don't even get allowed to ask Judge Kawamura for permission to leave.
And this is really no fault of the public defender's office. They deal with tens of thousands of people every year, and they have a limited number of attorneys. And unfortunately, they can't get involved until someone has been actually charged and appear in court. It's a great deal of difficulty. So it's easier for private counsel to get the ball rolling and do these things. The sad fact is that we have a system that favors people who have the ability to retain private counsel to get your assistance. Most people don't have that freedom to do that. And it's especially, exacerbated by the pandemic. We're seeing more and more people people are still getting arrested every day. Crimes haven't necessarily changed, but they're having greater difficulty getting access to getting bailed out. There was a bail reform committee that I participated in. Judge Kawamura and former Judge Ram Trader, who's now a federal magistrate, headed up this committee. We put together quite a bit of information. I know you participated. Your father also spoke, as did.
There it is.
There you go, Dog the Bounty Hunter.
There it is.
We tried to reach a middle ground that would still allow people to post cash bail, albeit all of it, the whole amount, or to go through bail bond companies where they're able to save quite a bit of money, not even to tie up all their funds, or to be released on their own recognizance. Our legislature is still dealing with that problem, and it's rather unfortunate. I'm involved in many issues before the legislature and the courts involving criminal justice, and they say justice delayed is justice denied. It truly is a problem, because in all these cases that we're discussing, the bail situation here in Hawaii, we still haven't found a consistent pattern from county to county that allows people to have access to getting bailed out 24/7, as well as finding alternatives to 100% cash bail or alternatives to cash bail.
Yeah, but we'll keep working. We'll keep working, right?
It's the good fight.
That's a good fight. Very good. So another thing that was in the news was Kathy and Louis Kealoha's Hawaii Kai house was sold, and there's actually a profit. So that profit is actually being divvied up among the victims in the federal case, most notably the Taito family.
Correct.
I think it's the niece and the nephew, but
Correct.
They're within the family.
Right.
An attorney, and I feel as though maybe the media was just trying to help that family out, but then they kind of turned, and then they made it seem as though the attorney who might have a higher position to get at those funds was owed $93,000 for legal fees. What are your thoughts on the legal fees versus the family who needs the money?
Okay. As a disclaimer, I have a conflict of interest. I previously represented Catherine Kealoha and former Chief Louis Kealoha up to the time they were indicted. I'm familiar with the property. I've been in their home several times. And one of the reasons I had to withdraw from the case was that all of their property was seized and deprived them of the ability to refinance and hire private counsel. So this is even people as successful, albeit as the Kealohas, the government targeted them where they were most vulnerable, which is to seize all their property as evidence of the crime or fruit of the crime they were charged with. Moving forward with the case, there was a mortgage, there was money owed on the mortgage, the property was liquidated, and there was some money in excess of the amount that was owed. But there were legal fees by the bank and their attorneys, and that ended up in a dispute with the attorney representing, or there are several attorneys representing family members who were injured by the Kealohas. And they all have legitimate claims. The issue is going to be, imagine the issue of secured property. Is there a secured debt? Is someone, is someone out their attorney fees? Or in this case, as I said, I think one of the attorney representing the Taitos, the brother and sister, has asserted that the excess money should be given to them and that he intends to go forward. And I basically rattled the sword and said he's going to be, implying he's going to be suing them. My hat's off to him. Be my guest. The problem is, you can't get, blood from a rock. There's little to be had. The Kealohas have no funds, and I know that recently the retirement money is now an issue that Louis Kealoha received from the HPD when he retired. That's going to be a whole ball of wax. How they're going to recover that money. There's issues regarding Catherine Kealoha's former attorney who defended her on the original civil case against her uncle. Got a defense verdict, a six-figure verdict. He never got paid, but he's owed that money. That may be considered a secured debt. On the other hand, when Catherine Kealoha entered into a plea agreement with the government, she had to, as I understand, as part of her plea agreement, disavow the verdict, the defense verdict in the civil case, and essentially admit that it was obtained fraudulently, which then raises all types of issues about whether her attorney was either aware of that, participated in that fraud, or is even now entitled to any remuneration, any monies from the defense verdict that was obtained fraudulently. So these are interesting issues. Are they going to be resolved with people, threatening to file lawsuits? Not likely. Push comes to shove. At the end of the day, you can get a verdict of $1 million, for example, but if there's no money, it's $1 million you'll never collect. Mm-hmm. I understand the position. I believe that Ali Silver said that they should be magnanimous, and the mortgage carrier, and let the money go back to the two people who were injured. I think that would be a wonderful notion, a great generosity, but banks and mortgage companies are not notorious for being generous nor magnanimous.
Yeah.
Just the opposite. They want their money regardless, and they resell the property. It's like a used car dealer reselling a car, 3 or 4 times and basically making the car over, repeatedly, benefiting from someone's economic distress.
Yeah, totally. But I just hope, and I'm just going to throw it out there, I know the game with you attorneys, and I'm going to go ahead and call out something that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's a joke. One of the great jokes that all the attorneys I'm sure have heard way too many times is, an attorney, a 49-year-old attorney dies and is at the pearly gates of heaven. And then, how am I here? Send me back down to earth. I shouldn't be here. This doesn't make any sense. And then St. Peter or whoever's at the gate says, oh, well, according to your billable hours, you're 164 years old. You know what I mean? The joke is maybe they pad the billable hours. I think, because I don't want to accuse
and all this is going to be I understand what you're saying, and this is typical of the public, viewing this, and that it happens. I mean, people bill accordingly. And in a case like this, given all the players and they're very well polished and well-educated and aggressive attorneys across the board involved in the Kealoha case, anyone billing in this matter better have all their I's dotted, all their T's crossed, and every document to connect to the hours they billed out. Because believe me, this is all going to get reviewed by either Judge Seabright directly or by a special master appointed by Judge Seabright.
Oh, okay. That's a big difference then. That's a big difference from the point I was making.
No, I understand.
Because I was thinking maybe
I don't disagree
with
you. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, maybe he's padding.
In all fairness to billable hours, I went into law first as a prosecutor in California, and then here in Hawaii 33 years ago. I don't like doing billable hours. I have, in the course of my 33 years practicing, only a handful of cases have I billed hourly, and I don't like it. I don't like billing clients hourly. Having been a client before becoming an attorney, I remember hiring an attorney when I lived in DC, and I watched a $5,000 retainer disappear, and what I got for it was a 6-page letter explaining that I had no case.
Ouch.
And a bill saying I spent X number of hours, pay me more. That was an enlightening experience. So I don't practice law that way. I feel a certain degree of I know no regret, but I feel sorry for my friends who practice in civil litigation or in civil practice, especially in the defense side, who have to bill for every single moment that they're breathing in the office or
Yeah.
sitting in their car in traffic. They're told by their partners that you have to bill for all of this. Hence, you have people billing in a 24-hour day, 48 hours.
Yeah, it's crazy. But we're going to finish this podcast off on something positive. Predictions. Although 2020 has continued on and been kind of a dumpster fire the first 2 weeks, what predictions, hopefully positive, some wins, do you see in 2021?
I expect by the end of 2021 that a significant majority of Americans will be inoculated with the vaccine. That's number one. We can't get anything remotely close to normal until we get the pandemic and the infections, under control. Given that now there are two variations of it, there was one usually in Great Britain, there's another one that's popped up, and this is the nature of viruses. The virologists from Dr. Fauci down have told us to expect this, that this is the nature of a virus. It adapts. Fortunately, so far, the vaccines that have been put into the public, that have been distributed, appear to be effective. So my prediction, like anyone else, is that I hope for the best. We prepare for the worst, we hope for the best. So by the end of the year, I'm anticipating that we'll be able to start wearing masks less often in public, but it really is going to require that all of us get vaccinated. Now, I know there are a lot of people, possibly even some of my clients, that are anti-vaccination, that feeds into the paranoia that it's a government plot. I would submit, and I would have no objection, that the government made it mandatory. Just like I believe there should be mandatory masks, there should be also mandatory participation in getting a vaccine and getting vaccinated. Because this is a national crisis, I think the government needs to be more forceful and set a standard, but at the same time, make it mandatory, especially for certain positions, law enforcement. And then the prisoners, we have, vectors throughout the country where the prisons are a hotbed of the infection. Certainly my clients whose family members are in prison are terrified that their family members are going to die. A number of my clients have become quite sick. I've lost several clients up on the mainland in Arizona, where the Hawaii inmates are housed. It's a tremendous concern, but I try to be positive about it. We're having this conversation, which means we're still alive. Okay.
Yes.
And going forward, it would be a wonderful way to end 2021 that we can greet each other on the street unmasked.
Right on. And I'm going to add my hopeful prediction for 2021. I think Judge Alm is going to be a great city prosecutor, and I'm very interested for the future of the city prosecutor's office to see which way it goes. We have what's kind of been deemed like a slight. We have what's called activist DAs who encourage rehabilitation over incarceration and different programs that are seen, like his Weed and Seed program or Hope Probation. I just want to see what it's like I see him more as a moderate, but then leaning towards activist, DA or prosecuting attorney. I want to see what he rolls out and how it affects crime. And I'm very hopeful that the change is going to be good. And then if we don't really see a nice reduction in crime, I think it'll be an opportunity for a different variation of how we charge crimes, and hopefully society can be better and crime can be lower. We'll see though. I'm hopeful.
I don't disagree with that. I've known Steve Alm since I moved to Hawaii 33 years ago. We were prosecutors together under Charles Marsland. We had our differences. I fought against him when he became the U.S. attorney vigorously. We had harsh words often. When he became when he became a judge, I would say we both grew up. And I began recognizing, I think, Judge Alm, now Chief Prosecutor Alm, saw the other side of the equation, the impact on families and defendants. When you're sitting on the bench and you're putting people in jail over and over and over for the same thing, mostly drug addiction driven. You begin to wonder, well, are you suffering a bout of insanity? The notion that, you keep asking the same question, expecting a different answer is the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
I think most judges experience the malaise of sitting in court and watching one generation after another of a family coming through their system, and you say, this is not working. Locking someone up is not doing it, because it just carries on. So the Hope Probation Program, it's a smart program. I asked Judge Al many years ago what he based it upon. He said, essentially, the parenting that he experienced from his parents, he applied to his children. And I think that's a wonderful way to look at this issue, that we have to, the court should take on a more parental role in some respects. People need that support. We have too many people that are impulse driven because of their drug addiction and their underlying psychological problems. Unfortunately, the Hope Probation Program recognizes that. I would love to have seen it expanded into Hope Parole and all other aspects. I know when Judge Allen went to DC after he retired, he got involved with the Obama administration, tried to develop it as a model to be adopted across the country by the various states. I'm happy he's back here. We needed him here. I supported him in his a bid to be elected as prosecutor. I'm looking forward to some positive results. Does it mean I'm going to stop fighting him? No.
Well, you got to advocate for your clients, and I totally understand your position. And I will put one little thing, because I'm a little bit I'm anxious to see how it works out. This is a great experiment, and we're still waiting to see how it affects overall public safety. So he's the guy who created the program. If it's going to be run properly, that's the guy, the founder. So I'm very interested as a social experiment to see how things shake out over the next few years, because we all just want safer streets, and we don't want, our loved ones being in danger. And I'm very interested to see how this all pans out.
And everything you just said also is applicable to our democracy. It's a work in progress. That's why people look to the United States and to our government. And that's why it is really so apropos that we have rid ourselves of a tyrant or a wannabe tyrant. And we need to rebuild the infrastructure of government and the institutions that support it.
Very good. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. Be well and good luck.
All right. Aloha.